a powerful marketing tool that creates a win-win for everyone involved. I have an entire section in my book, Space Marketing, dedicated to using this marketing strategy. An event can generate buzz. It gives a reason for content to be created and consumed. Some benefits include building awareness of a brand, an industry, or an idea like space. Establishes industry expertise. Provides a story for content. Expands network opportunities. Provides opportunity for goodwill and interaction. Promotes the industry. A strong industry equals more opportunities for everyone. It can ignite imagination. It provides a future pipeline for employees. And it enhances social credibility for everyone. Everyone benefits that is involved in the event. The host shares an idea and establishes their company as the industry experts. Sponsors align themselves with the ideals of the event, and it generates awareness for their brand. Speakers establish expertise while promoting their brand. And the audience gets to network with like-minded people and learn things about their industry through workshops and sessions. One conference that I had the privilege of attending is the Space Tourism Conference this past spring. It was the most fun I have had at an event. The people were amazing, the conversation stimulating, and I really felt connected and a sense of belonging among my peers. The Space Tourism Conference, started by the Space Tourism Society, leads this emerging industry to its new golden age of space tourism. The Space Tourism Conference, started by the Space Tourism Society, that leads this emerging industry to the brink of its new golden age of space tourism. Please welcome John Spencer, co-founder and chairman of the Space Tourism Conference, as well as the founder of the Space Tourism Society, and Allison Dollar, co-founder and executive producer of the Space Tourism Conference, as well as CEO for ITV Alliance. Hello and welcome to the Space Marketing Podcast.
Thanks, Izzy. Looking forward to the discussion with you.
Oh,
great to see you.
I'm looking forward to it as well. The conference was one of my favorite events that I have been able to attend. It's just the synergy was amazing. It was almost like a family reunion.
It did have a spirit and a ambiance that was almost magical. It was, people felt very comfortable walking up to someone they'd never met before, and within minutes they were good friends. It was just one of those really wonderful experiences.
Yeah, and we were coming right off of what is the biggest year we've ever had in space tourism. 2021 had historic flights, and since then, we've had private astronaut missions to the ISS. So can you tell me about the events that made this time so exciting?
The advances that we had with the big three, of course, SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, all of which we honored at our Space Tourism Awards. But I think backing up just one titch on the dial there regarding the other piece that made everything special is coming out of COVID. I don't think we can sort of set that aside as part of the reason everyone was so open and expansive and interested, because imagine if these are people that are interested in space tourism and space advances in general, and the opposite of exploring new frontiers was happening, where everyone was confined to very small spaces for a very long time. So aside from the general populace, of course, hated being cooped up, but imagine people who already have the imagination and will and desire and expertise to be pushing these extra, literally expanding universe, to have been cooped up. So you have this nice dichotomy going on there that really set it up. And the reason I say that is because as a framing device is because the whole impetus for the conference is to give an outlet to making real things happen and real business happen. And that's why our tagline is building the space experience economy across the board.
Through Space Tourism Society, started planning the Space Tourism Conference in 2019. We were going to have the first one in 2020. We had to shut that down because of COVID. We had the real first one, which was all virtual over 2 days, that worked great in April of 2001. And that led into the first in-person one where we did all come together. The fortunate setting of all this was there was 9 space experience flights starting in July of 2021, leading into 4 days before the conference in 2022 that were extraordinary. 9 space experience flights. These were not resupply to the space station. These were people going to space for the experience. And it was in with 10 months. So that was extraordinary. That was really the formal launching of this, what we call the second generation of the space tourist movement. The first generation was from 2001 with Dennis Tito flying on April 28th, which is why we always use April 28th as our anniversary events and go from April 28th to April 28th to April 28th. So the last flight was in 2009. So we had about 10 years because the shuttle was retiring before the next space experiences flights happened. And that rolled right into our conference. So we had so much content and so much positive vibes and successes of flights. The energy was amazing, and we want to pull that. I think
the other piece of it too, John, and speaking of the backdrop and the infrastructure there, is that the investment community really stepped up. And so the rest of the sort of, we always think of these marquee names that the general public might follow in the Wall Street Journal or USA Today, but then there's also the space industry and the aerospace industry. And those people in between got funding too. For instance, Space Perspective, which is one of our major sponsors, raised a significant amount of money to do their beautiful gondola that goes up and stays. And it's a whole different experience than spending money on rockets. But the venture capital community is expanding in terms of their participants, but they are seeing the larger vision of how big of an industry this particular part of participation is, that it is a very large opportunity for them. So there was activity all around. It's not all just the engineering and certain of these, feats of daring do and celebrities and all that. There is the other piece, which is that infrastructure that does depend on capital. And the capital is there. And that definitely was not the case back at the turn of the century to the same degree that it is now.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about the different events leading up to the conference.
Well, we had done over a number of years the series of space experience economy seminars. And Allison actually coined that term, space experience economy, a number of years ago. That began bringing a lot of people from different industries, which is one of our key activities, different industry, merging them together, with the core being the space experience. That's what's unique about our Space Tourism Society and conference. We have a very specific focus on the uniqueness and quality of the space experience. And not just in real space experience, but the space experience economy deals with Earth-based space experiences like space museums and space theme parks and movies and TV and all those things. We're based in Los Angeles, and Alice and I have been involved in all 3 of these areas of real space experience, Earth-based space experience, and movies. So our communities are diverse, and we bring them together in our events. So through the seminars, and then eventually we did the webinars. We did 8 webinars leading up to the Space Tourism in-person conference, covering specifically different areas of space experience. And that widened our audience, the voice we had, the ambiance we had, the networks, the sponsors, and so forth. So there's been a very logical building process up to the conference. And now the conference itself is annual. It's always on April 28th, and a day or two before or a day or two after when we extend it, that anniversary date. And we're just going to grow the conference and build it into a very important international annual event. And the core is the experience, but also the core is an open forum for really unique new ideas. Everything's a new idea at one time. And we want our conference to facilitate a friendly, welcoming environment with people from a wide variety of backgrounds coming together with new ideas. Some of them are great, some of them not so much, but that's how it all starts, with ideas, and we provide that forum for people to have a voice.
So some of the audience that are listening to this are marketing and other ones have not had very much experience in the space realm. So let's touch a little bit upon what happened in 2021 that made it such an exciting year for space tourism. So we can start with the big three, but there was more than just the big three.
There was. I think it was July 11th, 2001, Richard Branson's and his Virgin Galactic had their maiden flight with Richard Branson on board the space vehicle to suborbit. About 10 days later, Jeff Bezos and his brother, they had the maiden voyage, Blue Origin's rocket, and actually passed a little further than the Kármán line, which is the big dividing line from atmosphere to space. And then a whole series of other events started happening with Elon Musk. An extraordinary thing happened which really garnered worldwide attention, which was called the Inspiration 4 mission. And that's where a wealthy individual chartered, first time in history, chartered an orbital space mission and had 3 friends go with them. They spent 3 days in Earth orbit inside of the modified Dragon capsule, with a beautiful dome on the end of it because they didn't dock with the space stations, for gorgeous views of Earth. And then we had the Japanese fellow bring an assistant to fly to the International Space Station. First time a person had done that in 10 years. And then we had Axiom Space. There was other more missions with Blue Origin, but then Axiom Space did an amazing thing in April, where they flew their first crewed mission on a SpaceX rocket Dragon capsule to the International Space Station. There was a retired astronaut as the commander and 3 passengers, 3 space tourists. Each of them spent $55 million for their seat. They spent 16 days, the mission was extended, inside of the International Space Station, had a great time, also did a lot of science, and safely returned 4 days before our conference. So as I said, we had a lot to talk about and visuals, and it was one of those things where I think most people sensed something was happening. This was really coalescing and beginning. So that was one of the wonderful experiences of the 22 conference.
And from the Axiom side, they had also integrated some scientific experiments during that mission. So they actually put those ticket holders to work.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing about the industry at this stage, is that and there's always debate. It's like, really, are you an astronaut if you just pay and go? Do you get to call yourself that? There is a fair amount of training in order to be able to go up. Will that always be the case? Probably not, right? Because at some point, there are people who in the future or just want to go to a resort hotel in space, see the view literally of Earth, and have a cocktail. So, you now are seeing, this is why we use a term ecosystem very deliberately, because you see the stratification, like you do in any other industry, between people who want a certain kind of experience and people who are more venturesome and people who are actually working press, so to speak. Right. And it's always an interesting debate there. And I always give the analogy back to the oceans. You go to a resort and there's people who sit on the beach and like to have their Mai Tai. There's people who want to go out on a paddle boat. There are people that scuba dive. Some scuba divers actually like to go on a shark dive. And, they are all actually tourists still. Even the people doing a shark dive, you would not call them oceanographers.
Right.
Right. So, this is an interesting conversation to have on an ongoing basis. As the industry grows, you're going to have these more colors of and layers of this kind of experience that we see. But I think, for the marketers who have not been in the sector, it's actually okay. I don't think they need a lot of grounding, using that pun specifically, in all the ins and outs of the industry, because there's internecine politics always with a big P and small p, with NASA and all that sort of thing. It's suffice to say for someone who is in marketing coming into it, that sort of the basics apply that always would apply here, which is that there is demand. Demand's been generated further and growing, and it's partly what we do with on the B2B side with a conference like this. But also there's imagination, which is, as John said earlier, is literally fueling a lot of these other things, these other developments that make it real. And then once you have that infrastructure up there, we're getting a new space station, which I think people who've been watching regular 60 Minutes news will know. And why we love to see what Axiom and our friends there are doing. So these are all happening. Some of them are in parallel tracks, and some of them are stratified this way. And that's what makes an ecosystem, makes it a real industry.
There's another space station, or a couple of space stations, that are due to go up by 2027. One of them is going to be one that's focused on entertainment. And that one is going to have a movie that's starring Tom Cruise. Another one is a hotel that is due to go up by 2027 as well.
There's also a paralleling development in the early stages of what I call the outer space yachting industry and community. And what that is basically using the model of ocean super yachts and mega yachts, which are beautiful ships and technology and operations and amazing stuff, and morphing that and uplifting it to Earth's orbit. So eventually you'll have private outer space orbital yachts, and you'll have yacht clubs, and you'll have a Coast Guard type of service we call the Space Guard service, and performing the same arts, and as Allison said, like the oceans of space, voyaging, cruising, all of those kind of romantic types of experiences for people. Now, what's also happening with that is that means there has to be many, many new kinds and diversity of jobs in space. And a lot of people come to us and say, I want to go to space. It's one of my dreams. I don't have the money. I probably won't win a competition. What am I going to do? And our typical answer is work in space, get a job in space, go many times. Someone has to assemble these ships. They have to test them. They have to be the crew members. They have to cook. They have to clean. So that people job-oriented infrastructure is going to grow and grow dramatically.
Well, plus, the equivalent of tugboats, are being funded and all that sort of stuff. There's green sustainability gear that has to be up there because recycling is especially important, and all of that. And also just, rounding that out, Izzy, from where you started, the entertainment itself, of course, as the behemoth that it is, there's all sorts of things going on there. Our friends at Space Hero, that is a competition reality show. They've way down the line of building a training facility and the whole thing. Those winners will go up. One of our supporters and sponsors, the Space Games Federation, Linda Rising there, is doing phenomenal work at fleshing out what space kind of games and sports will look like in that are adapted and adaptable for zero G. So there's all kinds of those places that are coming in, like, tributaries into this river from a variety of these sectors. And entertainment certainly is at the core of what we look at. And also, of course, what your folks do, the marketing piece, the branding, and also just the packaging of those things, because that's going to be very important. Right now, you can kind of get away with one-off. Okay, you go and back, but eventually, it's not going to fly. You're going to have to actually have
another pun.
I know, I can't help myself. That's my English literature background there. But all of those other aspects for work both on and off world around making this all happen in real are in multiplicity of places.
Yeah, even last year, 2021, we had one of the heads of marketing for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines on one of our panels talking about his vision for space-related cruising and so forth. So these industries that are related are starting to pay attention, and our conference creates that forum where they can comfortably come together, because it's not such an engineering, science, scary kind of conference. It's like, hey, let's talk about all this cool entertainment and space stuff. And that has really opened the floodgates to a lot of new people and ideas and so forth. And even a little step in what I was saying about that Inspiration 4 mission, one of the things that mission did was brought philanthropy to the space world in a big way. During their mission, they raised over $200 million for the children's hospital. And that was just an amazing thing for them to basically do. So there's this mixing and bubbling of things just popping together. And we think the next conference, which is end of April of 2023, it's still at the same hotel, Renaissance Hotel, will be a wider program. We're having a double track because there's so much content and subjects, more workshops, more people doing specialty talks. We're having an enlarged awards program. There's going to be more media attention there, and some big announcements happening. For example, I will announce the formation of the Outer Space Yachting Association as the baseline for establishing the outer space yachting industry and community. We're associated with the Overview Film Festival. We're going to be doing a lot more things with entertainment industry. There'll be more and more announcements. And it's the perfect forum for those kinds of announcements.
Hold on to your boosters. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Marketing strategies related to our guest visit can be found on spacemarketingpodcast.com in the Show Notes Expanded section, with corresponding page numbers to the strategies in my book, Space Marketing: Competing in the New Space Economy, available on Amazon and Audible. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Let's talk about some of the workshops and sessions and speakers that you can expect at an event like this. So I know personally there was, it's just a wealth of really interesting speakers last year.
Sure.
Yeah, we had, starting with the entertainment and working to sort of ground level stuff. We had Discovery. We had Butcherbird Studios, which specializes in immersive VR. We had all kinds of people from, of course, Axiom and Space Perspective and, those big players. And we had the LA Venture Association ran the finance panel. So I actually chair the space group for that organization. And, typically, and we'll see how this goes. Usually what we do is we start with the baseline of the year with those big players and then go further into the realm of imagination. And we usually end with the inspiration sort of thing. So we did have the Overview Effect folks and Space for Humanity at the end. So that's kind of how we built it. So the money and the infrastructure and all that, we had the Oceans of Space and some of the new players there. And then we worked our way up through there, including one on design and marketing. Some interesting people came in, like from France and whole thing. They were just wonderful. So some of them will be back. You mix it up every year to be a little bit different. I think one thing I definitely am putting on the program this year is on green and sustainability and that piece of it, because there's again a lot of investment going into that, and it's such a linchpin of building an infrastructure. We need to have all those things, and it's interesting, as from a marketing standpoint, it's sort of sexy and it's topical. And we'll see some other things like that added too. And some of it, as you know, is also making sure there's enough room to breathe so everyone can network and do business. Because the whole point of this, and what the other reason our tagline is what it is that it's not supposed to be everyone, navel and stargazing, and it's not supposed, it's very much a conference about doing real business and making real deals and having things happen that get implemented in real life. So we try to reflect that in the program, that there is a nuts and bolts a piece of this. So, and the entertainment people are always critical. I mean, I think in some respects, you can't say without Star Wars and Star Trek and all of the beloved franchises that some of this probably would have taken longer than it has. Don't you think, John? I think if you didn't have these sparks of imagination with Isaac Asimov and everybody, generations before, Ray Bradbury before, some of these things just would have been a harder sell to the more pragmatic pieces of industry to make it real.
You're 200% right. And for example, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, many of our other pioneers grew up on science fiction and grew up on the movie 2001 and Star Trek and all of those kind of things. And I was 13 years old when the Apollo 11 landed on the moon. So I was really captivated as a young person into that whole adventure, but also being a designer, and eventually was able to kind of combine those together with architecture and space as becoming an outer space architect, which is, to me, it's been a very life fulfilling experience and all these kind of things. It's just amazing. And to pick up another thing earlier, what Allison said, the diversity in infrastructure, one of the fastest growing segments in the space community is space law. There are more and more of these programs being developed at universities around the world, developing space lawyers, dealing with maritime laws, the core for space law and treaties and so forth. We need all that as legal infrastructure for all the things that we want to do. And there's developments of all kinds of design schools, film schools getting involved in all this. LA is rich with a lot of those that we'll be bringing together. But the ambiance, the feeling is great. And the core support is, as Allison said, the financial community is investing billions of dollars in the private space enterprise and space tourism ventures. Morgan Stanley is doing all these studies and analyses on the trends of the evolution of the space enterprise and aerospace industry. They're forecasting by the year 2040, that's just 18 years from now, it'll be just over $1 trillion worldwide space industry. A lot of people think it'll be more than that. And the diversity of that, I agree with you. The diversity of that is just going to accelerate and accelerate. And that's why, as we move forward with the conference, we're going to bring in more segments of the ecology of investment bankers, and not just venture capital guys. Some of the Morgan Stanley we hope to attract to basically give a report. All of the financial worlds, the legal worlds, even the accounting worlds are seeing an industry that's blossoming and growing. They want a part of it. And that's great, because those type of business support infrastructures are critical to actually getting money and properly using it and dealing with all the legal issues involved. So that in itself is a sign, a clear sign in the business world that this is happening and it's going to accelerate and it's something special.
And let's touch a minute on the $1 trillion by 2040. That is, to give the audience context, I looked it up today, and of the top gross national products for the countries that are in the world, number 15 is $1 trillion, and that's Indonesia. So everybody below number 15 in the world makes less than $1 trillion in their gross national product. So when you consider that an industry is bigger than most countries, that is estimated to be bigger than most countries, that is phenomenal. But I want you to go back to, let's see, 18 years ago. Where were we? The smartphone hadn't been invented yet. Social media was in its infancy. And what are we going to see with this that is going to just revolutionize everything and make that $1 trillion estimate look tiny?
Well, let's go back, like you're saying, the year 2004 in October was the year that the Ansari X Prize was won. And that X Prize was funded to by spaceships that could actually go up to the Kármán line within 2 weeks. And at the time when that started 10 years earlier, it was insane. It was impossible. It would never happen. And then it did happen. And that was the start. Everyone really kind of looks at that as the real start of private space enterprise really starting to rev up. And that was just in the year 2004. So we've seen the evolution of this industry, starts and stops, but the inevitable arc is upward and then eventually outward.
Well, I think too, the other pieces, which is why John and I have been friends for so long, and how we structured this conference to be the way that it is that you have concomitantly the media industry going digital. So, first we had the satellites, and that's all great back in those decades. But when the internet came in, there were many naysayers that this is like around when the web was being developed by Tim, that we would ever have video online. So just imagine that. That's my career. I was an early proselytizer for that. And believe me, the infrastructure and powers that be in that industry did not want to believe it. And so then you flash forward, 30 years. Now we have streaming companies that are winning Emmys and Oscars and the whole thing. And along those lines, the hardware itself, smart TVs, phones, of course, being able to be true communicators, the way we're talking about, with actually full screen color video and all of that, that was all poo-pooed too. A lot of naysayers there. And as you pointed out, Izzy, that's like all been compressed in a very, very short amount of time. So they feed off of each other. And I always say, well, what are those people say, well, what does that industry have to do with that? I'm like, well, satellites, right? And digital communication. And so of course, and I do have a bias, but I do think more in terms of that, we will see some pretty extraordinary entertainment-driven activities that will be helping to fuel and fund both demand and the rest of the sort of sub-economy within the space tourism economy there. I think that's what you're going to see within 10 years. The appetite is huge. And remember that the US was very late to the party in terms of going digital. We didn't have the digital transition. Europe was ahead of us. We had to I myself filed amicus briefs back, around the turn of the century for that, like, hey, when are we going to get digital infrastructure fully pushed out in the US? And, it was very late. So this is what happens with us, I think. And even if you go back to, Kennedy and doing the whole moonshot and all that, the reason that worked the way that it did through Congress was because he went on TV and said, let's do it. So, these things are always very inextricably linked, and everybody's found each other in this global community that are true believers in that respect. But it's not pie in the sky at all. It's actual real business. So I think, along those lines, Izzy, the bottom line there, I do think that the major advance is going to be medicine and health stuff, because that you can do, and that there's big pharma and people that have a vested interest in putting money in there, and in entertainment, media and entertainment kind of experiences and properties. And you've got to remember too that virtual reality and truly immersive, forget metaverse, whatever, the actual true VR is always used as a training tool by the Department of Defense into games, and now, more broadly out into the marketplace. So all those things, again, are wedded and will continue to be so.
And I want to talk a little bit about the funding of it and the billionaires that are involved. There's a narrative out there that says, well, it'll be just for rich people. Well, if you go back to the dawn of commercial air flight, it was just for the rich people. It wasn't for the everyday person. But as time goes on, it becomes more and more viable for on down the line. And then everybody can do it. Yeah, I can jump on a plane today, and I don't need to spend, airfares are a little bit higher right now than they have been, but it's affordable to the common person. So yes, right now it may be that the wealthy people get to do it. And I, for one, am so happy that they're spending their money to do it, because then that'll make it to where one day me or my children or their children can experience that as well.
Well,
And it will
even
be
in
commonplace.
Elizabethan times, the people who came across the Atlantic were staked by the Queen.
Yes.
The queens, actually, because of course Isabella, right? That's always were wealthy people in lords, and they took their commissions and they went. And you know, yeah, this is like again, this, and John and I talk about this quite often, is you know, there's a historical perspective, and also, of course, unfortunately, education, there's big gaps in what people know in terms of even the basics of history, you know, so sometimes we have to kind of go back and fill that in. And I'm glad you brought that up, Izzy, because that is absolutely true. It's not new that you have people with means saying, I want to go because it's there, right?
Right. I couldn't afford to build a rocket, and I am so glad that Elon can.
Yeah.
So glad.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And I do have one thing I disagree with for Allison. When you say it's, you know, pie in the sky, well, we will have pie in the sky, and we'll have caviar, we'll have champagne, and we will have cigars, actually, believe it or not, which
right.
is on yachts. So there will be pie in the sky.
That is absolutely true. And in fact, we have a champagne toast that we do at the conference.
We do.
Which is a very popular feature of the conference. Yeah. No, well, absolutely. Well, and the thing is for those people, the funders, the pie in the sky is actually an opportunity, financial opportunity, right? So absolutely. Well, and also, of course, you already have it more prosaically, the famous Hilton's DoubleTree cooking the chocolate chip cookies with nanoracks up on the space station, and that's led to a whole other cadre of things, including this latest announcement with Hilton.
Yeah.
So
absolutely,
it's real stuff and really happening. It's very exciting.
You're right about wealthy people flying, but we've had this number of people who are not wealthy get to fly to space. There was the 3 people that our friend, which basically Inspiration 4 brought as guests. There was the assistant that flew at Maezawa to the International Space Station for the whole time. There were people who have flown through space for humanity, 2 people who were gifted flights on Blue Origin. And you'll see more and more of that gifting, award winners, what Allison was mentioning about space heroes and the discovery, do you want to be an astronaut? So the opportunities of flying to space are growing, but the point of having a career, working in space, going numerous times, that changes the psychological dynamics pretty tremendously. And I've seen, when I mentioned that to young people, particularly when they have careers, their whole face, their whole posture, ambiance changes when a new direction pops up in their mind. I could work in space. That's enhancing and wonderful, and it's just going to grow the diversity of people that have that experience.
And back to the pie, because that relates to everyone. A lot of the things that will be developed as these hotels mature, as these yachts are created, all that technology to create that little ecosystem where people can thrive and have fun, all that technology will come back down here and impact what we use in our daily lives. More pie down here.
Absolutely. More pie down here, right? More diverse pie. Absolutely. And that's been that way for a long time, from military to aviation. These technologies develop and they're spun off for commercial use, household use, medical use is a big deal. And one of the core areas of study actually on the International Space Station is space medicine, space health, space wellness. And what they're discovering has pretty interesting applications for Earth-based health enhancement. So that in itself is great. What Allison was mentioning about sustainability, one of the big areas that's growing now, excuse the expression growing, is space farming. How do you grow food off-world? Hydroponics, how do you do all those things? So people from many, many different backgrounds are bringing their imaginations and ingenuity and ideas to how does humanity move outward in the solar system? Space tourism, space sports, space media are parts of that, but it's that spirit of exploration, that spirit of doing new, bold things. That's what brings life moving forward. We're all part of that, and our conference is an important, I think our conference, our space tourism conference, I think is a very important part of that because of being that forum for ideas.
Absolutely. And space tourism is not new. So during the period between 2001 and 2009, 7 space tourists made their way up to the ISS through with the Russian Soyuz spacecraft.
Right. Yeah.
But then there was like a big dry spell. But let's go even further back. Why don't we talk about how the Space Tourism Society got its start, and if you can tell us about the beginnings of it?
Sure. I actually started thinking about and promoting space tourism in 1982. And I just graduated from architect school, a master's program, and saw the space stuff and just realized I had one of those epiphanies that, wow, someday space tourism will be a big deal. Because I was actually working at a design company where we were designing the interiors of a Princess cruise ship. So space and Princess, that all kind of all popped together. People were very hostile to the idea of space tourism back there. I mean, genuinely hostile. I got thrown out of Rockwell twice, and both times had been invited to do a presentation. And they always throw you out the back of the building. It's a huge building, so you have to walk all along the side and all along the other side where the parking is. So they were pretty hostile to it. But it was actually a Japanese person who flew first from one of the big stations in Japan as a guest with the Russians. Then an English lady, Helen Sherman, won a contest and flew with the Russians again. So they were the first 2 private citizens to fly to space. And then there was a few more guests on the space shuttle and a few more guests with the Russians. So there were a number of people, didn't use the word space tourism, but private citizens who were not trained astronauts or cosmonauts who flew and had space experiences before. Dennis Tito, who was the first person to write the check to pay for his trip to space and to fulfill a lifelong dream. So from that point on, more people flew. One flew, Charles Simoni, flew twice. We've had a repeat customer, woohoo, who flew twice to the space station. Then we did have that slow time because of the shuttle retiring, and then it popped back up with the flights starting in 2001.
2021.
2021, I'm sorry, yeah.
Oh, yes.
So I think the STS, though, too, Izzy, was that John found his own community and created his own community of like-minded people over the time. And it's always been an international enterprise where we've had, STS has had chapters and things all over and supporters all over the globe. So the international part of that, of those who get it, has always been the case. And again, you know, not to keep hammering on this, but it's very much same trajectory of people who understood what next generation TV was going to be and all of that. There's a community. It's not that many executives have been around in the whole thing from the 80s on, but we all know each other. So it's, you know, it might be, I would say roughly not even 10,000 people, but they stayed in it because you do have proselytizers and true believers and people who understand the import of it for humanity, which is why we use that word in many of these organizations. It's a very big deal all the way around, both financially and in terms of the overall health and trajectory of us as a species,
Yes.
to be able to do both of these things and to do them in a connected way. So, I mean, John really was visionary with this in founding this.
And how long has the Space Tourism Society been in creation?
We really started in 1996. So we just had our 26th year anniversary, which is kind of cool. Allison produced our 20-year anniversary when it was the 20-year anniversary. That was cool. But I want to pick up again what she said about community. like-minded people finding a place to share ideas and community and being together. That's an important part, not just obviously with space, but all these other many different areas and stuff. So we, through the conference and the society and just our ambiance in general, and again, we've always had the great advantage of being here in Los Angeles, West Los Angeles. We've been able to draw people from so many different disciplines and more international too, which is great, getting their perspective of coming together and sharing an experience of moving forward, pulling society forward. And that's a very rewarding, enhancing, confidence building experience. So it's, no matter what the new thing is, it's the community, the visionaries, the people willing to step forward and push it forward, in many cases to risk their lives in some of these things to push forward. That's what pushes humanity forward. It really does.
And you know, Izzy, for your audience, that's where all the marketing work is, you know, ready to be done by the legions of marketers out there that are listening. There's messaging and positioning and managing all of the communication that has to be done. There's packaging. There's, of course, all these new companies that are literally startups with some, there's, and just on PR side, but on marketing in general, there's another place here where that's a huge opportunity that has opened up that needs to get rolling. And it's actually, I think, has lagged a little bit, because what's happened, to your point earlier, when you have the billionaires and all this, you know, the regular B2C press focuses on that, and that's sort of the shallow part of the story. But all of the rest of this infrastructure, as it gets built out, it all has to be managed and marketed properly and interconnected back out to the rest of the true network of outlets there and distribution. And so it can't all just be random social posts here and there and all of that. But people need to be able to do those real campaigns and all the levers, including 30s and 60s still, or at least 15s, all of that in terms of ad spots needs to happen and will happen. But that is where the opportunity is for space marketers.
Well, and for example, during the Apollo period, you know, we would never have gone to the moon in the first place if it hadn't have been for the marketing efforts of everyone involved. It was through that marketing effort that the American people got on board with it, that they elected people that would support it. And we saw the biggest part of our budget for space than we've ever seen since. And that takes support from the public, and which is, you know, fueled by marketing efforts. There was over 20,000 different companies that were involved in marketing that program. And so we need to get everybody on board again.
Yeah, and I think you're so right. And I want to share a quick story of one of the greatest marketers of our time. That was Walt Disney. And Walt Disney was wonderful at everything that he basically did. And there's a story where he had been producing called Man in Space, which was a TV series about how humans can go in space. This is before Kennedy made his speech. And with the renderings of those rockets and the moon and all that kind of stuff, Walt Disney, with Wernher von Braun and Willy Ley, who were the big rocket scientists, met President Kennedy in the Oval Office, laid out those renderings, and Disney explained to Kennedy the step-by-step process to go through. Wernher von Braun backed him up, and that gave Kennedy the confidence, actually, to make the lunar speech. We're going to the moon. And that was just earlier this month, 60-year anniversary of that at Rice University. But it was Walt Disney, a key player in entertainment and entertainment technology evolution. They were great pioneers, the Disney.
And continue to be.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the story of humanity moving out. But the credibility Walt Disney had and Wernher von Braun gave President Kennedy that confidence that this was not a Looney Tune thing. This was something that could really happen. So
and it's also not for nothing that aside from the Disney in the movies and all of his programming, also created an experiences with the theme parks. And so, you know, coming full circle in this conversation, that you had literally with that story, I'm so glad you mentioned that, John, that you have exactly what we're talking about, that they are inextricably intertwined, this entertainment, media, creative force that we have, especially here in LA, thank goodness, that cannot be any way more involved than it is. It's just like a huge force into what happens on the rest of the business, political, and technology side of the whole enterprise, literal enterprise. So,
yes, another pun.
I know, did it again. It's terrible.
I know, it's pun city.
Usually not quite so bad with all that, but
I know.
But John, that is very true. I'm so glad you brought that up.
And you could even go back in science fiction and writing, a form of marketing the future, with Jules Verne.
Yeah.
His writing of The Trip to the Moon. And one of the first films ever made, which was organized as a film, was Trip to the Moon.
Yeah.
First film in history. So marketing, communication, storytelling, adventure, it's all embodied together. One time it was crossing the oceans to the new world, or going west, young man, all stuff like that. And now it's going outward. So marketing and the way we position it is critical. And I'm so happy, Izzy, you wrote your book and you're doing these shows and you're really yourself pioneering the whole field of outer space marketing. Because how that story is told is how it will unfold for real. Is it a positive, exciting, joyful, together we're going, or is it like we're fighting each other? And of course, we'll be doing that with China and the moon stuff. But other than that, in Space Force, it's going to be a very positive. I can tell you stories there. But space marketing and having it a positive, bringing together, welcoming story through marketing and communication is critical for the health and well-being of the whole direction.
And also
Absolutely.
Not to disparage imagination as an engine for revenue.
Yeah.
Because I think in recent years, and unfortunately, some of our friends in Silicon Valley have tended to do that because they want to reduce everything to AI and to formulas and all this sort of stuff. And then they forget that, well, it has to start with a conception that's a spark, which is an idea, which is an active imagination, and that all of those other sides of the brain are totally valid to this and integral to this too. And same thing in long education with, this is why in STEM you have to add this into the A for arts into STEAM. Absolutely. Because these things are all integrated, and that's what an ecosystem is. And that's why we use the term in our tagline of the ecosystem, because experience in these multiple disciplines it takes a village, right?
Absolutely.
And everybody in every discipline, every sector has to play its part. And this is what makes it fun too. And that's the other piece, is you can't forget that we should all be, to John's point, joyful about it, or at least have fun in the meantime. Not that some things aren't frustrating. And of course, there's going to be conflicts and competition and whatever else. But if the overall aim
has to happen.
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, if you ever watched a movie where there's no conflict,
right?
It doesn't.
Not for long.
Not for long. It's what drives us forward. It's what makes us do incredible things on the positive side. So we need a little bit of competition to get us going.
Yeah, well, the friction creates the pearl, right?
Yes, so. Absolutely. What advice do you have for companies or organizations that want to be a part of space tourism?
Well, obviously, we'd say come to the conference and belong to some of these other organizations that we can recommend. It's like the Overview Effect Roundtable and all the other kind of subgroups there along those lines. Say there's, a range of organizations and things like that, and do what you're doing, Izzy, which is talk to people. And don't forget to read. People forget about the importance of reading. There are all kinds of books and magazines like Ad Astra and other organizations and things, even locally everywhere in the US, to join and belong to, which is, any marketer I'm sure knows that. But being involved, the key thing would be, of course, we would love to have, can come and see us at the Space Tourism Conference on April 28th, 2023 here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and we want people to pitch ideas to us for subject matter, for workshops, for special events, and so forth. And as I said earlier, we're a forum for new ideas. So we got to have lots of new ideas. So, and we hope more on the marketing, storytelling, experiential side of things. We're not an engineering conference. There's plenty of those good ones. We're the envisioning, experiential, communication, storytelling conference.
Well, and let's touch on how to sponsor. Do you have a sponsor program as well that if you want to be a part of the conference, you can sponsor parts of the conference?
Yes, indeed. We never turn down a nice sponsor. In fact, even that champagne toast we mentioned that we hold is able to be labeled with your brand.
We're evolving our sponsorship program to be more inclusive, a wider range of potential sponsors. And one of the great things about our conference is it's a huge range, from entertainment industry, cruise line, travel, media, all these other design industry, theme park industry, all that kind of stuff. So we're about to launch our new sponsorship program. We want to double the sponsorship we had last time, and double the amount of media attention, but also the outreach we have to a wider audience. So open to new sponsors, new ideas, new programming. It's, we're the cool guys. We listen to people.
Well, is there any last words that you want to leave the audience with? What are some final thoughts?
Well, I guess, it's always nice to think that people are listening and paying attention. And it's wonderful that you yourself, Izzy, are out there banging the drum and opening the conduit to the marketing world to figure out that there is a place for them and that it's not too early. And I think sort of circling back to the overall overarching kind of through line here on this is that we would like to reinforce joy in the notion of our own human existence, which is really part of what we're talking about. We have to go out world regardless of any other thing for many scientific reasons eventually, right? So what does it all look like, and why can't we make choices so that the future just continues to get better?
And make it fun.
Yeah, and Izzy, you're a rising star in this whole process because you wrote the book, Space Marketing. And marketing is just a key thing. So we're very happy you're part of this whole thing. You're leading this whole arena of space marketing. We're with you 100%, and we're super happy we're together.
Likewise, happy to be a part of the team as well.
Right.
Creating a conference or event is a powerful way to market an idea. It provides a venue for people of the tribe to come together, interested people to get more information, and share knowledge about the newest trends and tools. Please subscribe before you head on over to my YouTube channel for bonus footage. Links to the YouTube and other social media channels can be found on spacemarketingpodcast.com. A special thanks to Allison Dollar and John Spencer from the Space Tourism Conference for sharing this exciting emerging industry. Don't miss the Space Tourism Conference on April 28th, 2023 in Los Angeles. Be sure to check out their links listed in today's show notes. I hope that you have found this podcast useful for your journey as you reach for the stars.